The man returned to Earth, and the first thing he did before the destruction was to use all his resources to repair a broken calligraphy brush. Only he knew that this brush was a legendary double-class item, capable of granting him the hidden martial saint physique. Rewinding to a time before, a game called Battle.net quickly became a global phenomenon. Initially, it was just an ordinary game, but the emergence of the Space Alliance changed everything. The game became reality. If you died in the game, you would also lose your life in reality. Moreover, lower-ranked countries would be destroyed by monsters. This had become a struggle for survival. Now, only 10 countries remained on Earth. A nation was facing a life-or-death moment as they defended themselves against an invasion of apocalyptic monsters. Despite the large number of players involved, they were insignificant compared to these powerful creatures, easily wiped out by a single blow. However, the appearance of one man turned the tide. He concentrated his power in his palm and unleashed a full-force attack on the monster. A violent tremor followed, and a notification sounded indicating successful defense. This man was Shang Jihan, known as the Martial Saint. Although he achieved victory at the cost of a severed arm, the credit was given to the blonde man. According to reports, Baron Williams, the top guild leader in Country N and the world's #1 player, was simultaneously being treated by the Holy Maiden. While the man's solo victory over the monster was remarkable, as the guild leader, he couldn't tolerate his subordinates' brilliance. Therefore, he instructed his teammates to monopolize the rewards from the boss battle. Even though the remaining teammates were extremely dissatisfied, they were powerless to stop him, as he was now humanity's last hope. The guild leader explained that the reason for not sharing the rewards with the man was that he wasn't from the Southern Kingdom. Clearly, the man was already used to this, even with his 3-level skills and being in a position of power. He was ranked 7th in the world, but because he wasn't from Manhwa, he faced various forms of neglect and discrimination. However, what tormented him even more was that he was now the only one left in H country. Just as the man's arm was about to heal, a notification came from ahead that the mission was over. M country had successfully defended, Z country had successfully defended, and the remaining 8 countries had all failed. However, the victory condition required more than half of the players to survive. Clearly, humanity had failed. Now, humanity was at a critical moment of life and death. They had to defeat Uruk to have any hope of survival. Upon hearing this, the Saintess immediately suggested to the guild leader that if they were facing Uruk, then they would need Zihan's help. After all, it was thanks to him that they defeated that monster last time. But before he could finish speaking, the guild leader decided on the person to go and deal with it. With a white light appearing, a huge Uruk suddenly appeared before everyone's eyes. At the same time, the guild leader immediately unleashed all his power, and then a surge of lightning power floated around him. But just as he fiercely attacked the monster, a black shadow flashed by, and then the news came that the guild leader was dead. Upon seeing this, everyone immediately fell into panic. In less than a moment, all the humans were wiped out. With the monster swinging its giant axe for the last time, a sound came from the front. The game ended and humanity was classified as a worthless species. The Space Alliance decided to eliminate humans. Black matter then began to appear around them, instantly engulfing them, and the world was doomed. Even the man thought so. But the next second, an error message appeared. One human had survived. It was the man's nameless divine skill that had resisted the elimination. Even the Space Alliance was surprised. If they had known the true name of the nameless divine skill earlier, H country wouldn't have been destroyed, and they could have protected their most important people. Meanwhile, the gods of the Space Alliance became interested in the man, and after a vote, this gave the man another chance to challenge himself. His vision blurred, and when he opened his eyes again, he found himself back before the game began. It seemed like a good opportunity. If he could make good use of the experience he had accumulated in his previous life, he could definitely change the future. No, he didn't necessarily have to change the future. This time he would protect everything, because he had witnessed the world's destruction. Now he was back. When the Space Alliance first appeared, H country's performance was still very stable. In the world player rankings, 11 players were considered the strongest, and the third-ranked player was from H country, Sword King Yoon Sejin. Because of his existence, H country's position remained unshakable by other nations. However, one day, the Sword King suddenly announced his intention to join Japan's new guard, the most shocking news in H country's history. The man happened to return to that day. In his memory, since the Sword King's departure, H country's ranking on the battle network had plummeted. Because of the Sword King's departure, H country ultimately suffered destruction. And this guy was actually his brother-in-law. He didn't understand why his sister would fall in love with such a man. If his sister were still alive, would things be different? But now was not the time to ponder such questions. His current stats were abysmal. This is understandable, given that the man had been wasting his time because he didn't realize how powerful this talent truly was. In this world, while all humans over 18 become players, only a very small minority awaken their talents. When his talent was rated the lowest level, F, he began wasting his time, unaware that the true value of this skill would only be revealed after awakening. Now, however, he's very confused as to why, despite possessing only level 1 attribute values, he's listed as level 2. Suddenly, he remembered that he had accidentally consumed experience points, which led to his level up. But what was this? Why did he have 100,000 performance points? He didn't remember any great achievements he had made. Could it be due to his return? Just then, a performance point exchange coupon caught his attention. It could open the performance shop, and it seemed like a special item exclusively for men. So he decisively used it. The next second, the performance shop appeared before him. It seemed that items could be added by upgrading the shop level. He then upgraded the shop level to level 4. The next second, a notification appeared that an emergency repair item had been added, which could restore incomplete items to their complete state. At this moment, the man could no longer hide his joy. He then went into the game room. Although this was something left behind by the Sword King, thanks to him, the man could now enjoy himself. He then took out his first item, a broken calligraphy brush. With the use of emergency repair, the broken calligraphy brush was successfully repaired in the next second. The preparations were now complete. Meanwhile, the beginner's tutorial for the Jiangnan Bronze League was about to begin. Looking at the limited time remaining, the man immediately summoned his status window and began writing on it. There was a reason he was called a martial saint in the past. This pen could merge all attributes into a single martial power value. Only by writing those 2 words with this pen could he obtain the legendary martial saint physique. A powerful force slowly gathered, and the attributes on the window fluctuated continuously. At the same time, the countdown ended, and the next second he was teleported to the battle network. This time, the task was survive the monsters and players in the arena. When half the players remained, the survival battle would automatically end. It was the arena. However, at this moment, he was more concerned about whether he had obtained the martial saint physique. After checking, the man breathed a sigh of relief. He had not only obtained the martial saint physique, but had also completed a unique skill achievement, increasing his performance by 10,000. It seemed like he had met an old friend again. And this was only the beginning of learning the nameless divine skill. However, as long as he possessed this, he could easily pass this competition. Just then, a notification popped up in the window. The man wasn't using the connector to play the game, and without it, he would suffer pain in the game. He suddenly remembered the connector left behind by the Sword King, a high-end product that could reduce pain by 99. However, there was no need to use it now. At the same time, a notification came from ahead. A limited-time mission in the tutorial rewarded him with 1,000 performance points for first place. With the martial saint physique, he could easily achieve this. As the game started, a figure flashed past behind him. Just when he thought he had captured the man, he froze in place. The man had blocked him with just 2 fingers. Now it was his turn to attack. The scene shifted, and time returned to before Du He Kuei's attack. He was preparing to shine in the competition. After all, The Jiangnan Bronze League was the stage for the stars of various guilds to make their debut. Guilds were places for cultivating and managing players. They could cultivate powerful players in the early stages of the league. He belonged to the Two-Star Guild, a guild directly operated by the Two-Star Group. He was already famous for having many rising stars. After acquiring the level 1 agility talent, he joined the guild. In this world, only a very few people can obtain such a talent, so he had a high probability of making it into the top 50. Among the contestants, he immediately noticed the man in the white vest, who seemed out of place. He immediately launched an attack, but to his surprise, the man blocked his attack with just 2 fingers. This was agility's only speed ability. The man then casually flicked the attack away. Does he dare to participate in this competition with just this little talent? He thought incredulously. Is he ignoring my agility talent? The man replied confidently. Upon hearing this, he immediately unleashed his full power. The next second, the figure appeared before the man, who dodged the attack. The man skillfully evaded his continuous attacks. Although the figure was much faster than the man from his previous life had experienced countless battles, and his attack trajectory was too predictable. The man could even anticipate the figure's movements. Just as the figure unleashed a full-force attack, the man knocked the long sword from the man's hand with a single palm strike, then caught it and pierced him through with a single sword strike. Although the man said he would never let the man off the hook again, only the man knew there would be no next time. As the player disappeared, the long sword in the man's hand slowly dissipated. The warm-up was over. To get first place, you needed to kill at least 5 people. As expected, no one would choose monsters as opponents. In Battle.net, besides players, there are monsters, but only killing 10 monsters is roughly equivalent to killing 1 player. Therefore, most players initially only chose other players as opponents, especially groups of monsters like those from Uruk. At this moment, a new mission came from ahead: eliminate the Uruk group and kill 3. 0 monsters, reward 500 performance points. Although it's a thankless task, the performance reward is 5 times that of killing humans. Since that's the case, there's no reason not to do it. Monsters are just monsters, nothing compared to real Uruk. So, let's give it a try. As the man rapidly approaches the monsters, the Uruk attack him. At the same time, 2 axes hurtle towards him, but he catches them effortlessly. That's how axes should be thrown. The axe flies up instantly, taking down 2 monsters. While the monsters are still in shock, the man has already moved behind them. With a swing of his battle axe, the heads of many monsters are swiftly severed. The mission progress is now 16. Just then, a multitude of monsters attacked the man, but he merely turned and instantly slaughtered them. Simultaneously, a spear hurtled towards him, but he snapped it in 2. Even the orcs nearby were incredulous at this sight. While they were still stunned, the man swung his giant axe at the orc, but the axe also broke in 2. Seeing this, the orcs seized the opportunity to swarm towards the man, but he remained calm. He suddenly exerted force with his feet, and the ground around him exploded. Then, he leaped into the air, grabbed his long sword, and in a flash, he had completed the task of eliminating the orcs, earning 500 experience points and leveling up. Generally, experience points are calculated around time missing. After the game ended, although the man didn't understand what had happened, improving his attributes was always a good thing. So he increased his combat power, a unique attribute that combined all other attributes, allowing him to unleash twice the power of an ordinary person. More importantly, when his combat power reached 30, he could unlock the nameless divine skill. However, in the man's mind, combat power wasn't an attribute that could be easily increased. He had to constantly accumulate combat experience and training to improve it. But now he could increase it so easily. If things continued like this, it would be fantastic. Just then, an arrow flew straight towards the man, who dodged it to the side. It seemed the two had begun to team up. This kind of thing happened frequently here, and the symbol was that of the Turtle Guild, one of the top 10 guilds in each country. It seemed the two belonged to the same guild. Meanwhile, only about 60 players remained, and the game was about to end. It seemed there were only so few left. If he could dodge this attack, he could pass the match. While the two chatted, the man checked the score. Although he had only killed 4 targets, he was still ranked first, seemingly holding onto his position. Just as the woman was about to attack the man, a figure flashed past, instantly killing her. Perfect. A test of 6 combat points. The nearby warrior trembled in fear. The next second, the man swiftly appeared behind her and unleashed a powerful strike to her back. However, the armor was unexpectedly tough. The man then frantically slashed at one spot, and with each strike, the armor shattered. A mere grade armor. How could it be so easily destroyed? Maybe you can defend against me? Just as the man broke through the enemy's armor, 2 people were observing his every move on the screen. Even Li Haiyan, the head of the personnel department, was quite surprised. It was fortunate that he hadn't appeared next to Lin Jiaying. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have even secured second place in the competition. However, the head was very curious if you were to encounter him in the next match. Could you defeat him? Although he said he would try to avoid the man, the head ordered him to face him hidden in order to gather more information about him. He stared at the man on the screen, lost in thought. Shang Jihan seemed to have seen him somewhere before. Lin Jiaying was known for her level talent and was a rising star carefully promoted by the Divergent Guild. She was supposed to make a name for herself in the Jiangnan Bronze League, but the man's appearance changed everything, leaving everyone bewildered. Why would a level 2 participant possess such formidable strength? Who exactly is he? The scene shifts. The Jiangnan Bronze League has concluded, and the experience points gained from the competition have propelled him from level 3 to level 6. The man then allocates all 3 attribute points to his martial prowess. Simultaneously, he acquires a title called Conqueror, which grants him 1 point to all attributes and a 20 bonus to experience gained in the Bronze League. While only applicable to the Bronze League, the stats seem quite impressive. With the title stat boost, his martial prowess reaches 10 points. At 10 points, he can easily clear the Bronze League. The Silver upgrade battle will unlock after level 25, so he only needs to focus on the Bronze League. Just then, he suddenly remembers something. This is the job change. When players reach level 5, they can choose to obtain a basic job. Job change is a crucial moment for players without a job, granting them job skills. There are 4 job types: warrior, archer, mage, and healer. The man in his previous life chose to become a warrior. If he were to choose to become a warrior again, he could grow faster. However, the appearance of the business shop gives the man another option. He can choose different jobs to experience, and then, when necessary, spend 10,000 business points to increase the job slots. In this way, warrior is no longer the first choice. So, this is the profession we'll be choosing this time. The scene shifts to the Jiangnan Bronze League, and the mission this time is defense, protect the crystal, and survive the horde of zombies. The battle will continue until only 5 towers remain. Just then, 2 blue lights appear, one an archer from the LK Guild, and the other a well-equipped mage without a guild. Now, only the most needed profession remains the healer. The defense mission is a war of attrition, so the healer's support abilities are extremely important. But the next second, Lin Jiaying froze in place because a familiar face appeared before her. It was Shang Jihan. So this is the defense mission after all. 20 minutes ago, the man chose the healer profession. Although the window indicated that the profession was not compatible with the user, he still decisively pressed confirm. His reason for choosing the healer was simple: choosing a support profession unlocks the skill Divine Power, a necessary factor for acquiring another unique attribute. However, that unique attribute is difficult to develop because it cannot be improved through training but requires a large investment of performance points. Currently, performance points can only be used on the nameless divine skill. However, the man quickly solved this problem. He thought of a very reliable solution. Meanwhile, the mage was loudly complaining, believing the man's tattered clothes were unworthy of being in the same party as his expensive gear. Although the archer tried to dissuade him, he remained unmoved. Just then, The man picked her up and threw her heavily over the tower. If you don't want to play, then don't. We can live just fine without you. After throwing her over the tower, she was no longer arrogant. Now she was begging the man to let her go. She was willing to do anything for him. The person kneeling before her was named Jean Gueha. Her change in attitude had a reason in this competition. Each participant had 3 lives. At the beginning, he lost one due to the man's actions, and then lost a second during a conflict with the man. Now he only had 1 life left. If he died again, he would be at the bottom of the competition. To avoid being last, he begged the man to spare him, because being at the bottom would result in demotion. In that case, he would have spent a fortune to buy. Buying expensive skills would result in their disappearance without a trace. Skills were automatically deleted when the level and skill didn't match. The man suddenly remembered that he seemed to be very skilled in fire magic. Of course, fire magic was very effective against monsters, and he was currently a level 15 mage, so he was certain the man wouldn't easily discard such a valuable resource. Lin Jiang, standing nearby, was deep in thought, wondering where she had seen him before. Then she remembered that his name was Jean Gueha. He had been a member of one of the top 10 guilds, a highly anticipated mage, but had failed the silver upgrade tournament 4 times. Since then, he had been wandering around, having caused trouble and ultimately become a loser. Jean Gueha suddenly made a condition to the man: if the man apologized, he would cooperate with the others. A moment of silence fell over the surroundings. The next second, a familiar action came into view. "How dare you make me apologize?" The man then hurled him into the air and struck him with his staff, sending him flying. The mage outside the tower, Jean Gueha, was dead. The scene shifted to the mage next door using fire magic. Just as Jean Gueha had said, fire was very effective against monsters. The group was now in a dilemma and began to rebuke the man for his actions. Meanwhile, the man was checking his window. The task was limited to 1-man reward 1,000 performance points for first place. There was also a related task: solo kill 1,000 zombies for 3,000 performance points. He simply didn't have enough time to complete it, but he didn't want to give up the 3,000 points, so he fell into deep thought. Lin Jiang, who had been observing the man for a while, concluded that he was just a self-centered guy, and the Analyst Guild had no reason to investigate him. Just then, the blonde man beside him prompted him. "If this continues, you'll have to fight alone. Can I do that?" The man pondered. "Perhaps I can." "Okay," Lin Jiang said, adding that the healer should stay in the back while he acted as the frontline fighter. The man, however, insisted that this wasn't necessary, as he could be the frontline fighter, and he only needed to protect the archers. Just then, a gigantic blood-soaked zombie appeared before them. As the two prepared for battle, the man had already raised his long staff, and in the next second, a powerful thrust killed it instantly. Even the two were shocked. This was sacred fire. Was it divine power? At the same time, numerous zombies rushed towards the man, but he dealt with them in moments. Although he didn't know if he could do it, he was willing to give it a try. Mission completion progress 61,000. At that moment, the man suddenly exerted his strength, and in the next second he charged into the horde of zombies. He wielded his long staff, rapidly weaving through the horde. In no time he had killed 26 zombies. The blood zombies were immune to physical attacks. The man only unleashed some divine power when they encountered him, killing them instantly. Seeing this, even the blonde man beside him became a devoted fan. Only Lin Jiang was utterly astonished, because not only could the man precisely control the release of his divine power, but more importantly, every attack he made was aimed at the monster's head. Just then, the mission was 15 complete. This perfectly fulfilled the conditions for upgrading divine power, and then information arrived that the man was increasing his divine power. It seemed he had guessed correctly. This was another way to upgrade divine power, and how to use it correctly. When the sacred object first appeared, its inherent mystery drove its price sky high. But after 10 years, humanity failed to discover its hidden value, and it eventually became worthless. However, The man learned from Sophia that the sacred object could increase the user's own divine power, although only for use in competitions. The reason it became a sacred object was because he held it and prayed for a long time to gain divine power. However, the conditions for using each sacred object were different, and he knew that someone had been collecting these sacred objects. At this moment, the man suddenly remembered him. Perhaps he recognized that person. Upon his return, the man had visited the Sword King's attic to investigate, only to be met with shock. The floor was littered with defunct relics. Indeed, the one who had been collecting these relics was his sister. She had fought alongside the Sword King and was hailed as a hero, but that was all during her lifetime. Meanwhile, the man noticed a lever nearby, a rare relic. It absorbed divine power by striking the heads of evil beings, and the man had used it to enhance his own. However, the amount of divine power he could absorb was now minimal, though it was still quite useful for defending against monsters. Lin Jiaying, however, was utterly astonished, for in her understanding, this kind of operation couldn't be performed by. The keyboard displayed the attack, and the blonde man beside him was suggesting whether to help those people. Just then, a zombie pounced on the blonde man, but the next second, a gorgeous figure flashed by, and the monster was killed on the spot. At this moment, the man felt that he looked very familiar. It was Lin Jiaying, the Plum Blossom Swordsman. Although he was a potential candidate to become the next Sword King, unfortunately, he ultimately died at the hands of Yin Shizhen. Then, he extended an invitation to the man, saying that if they cooperated now, their rankings could reach a higher position. After checking the scores, the man agreed. "Then I'll leave this to you." Then the man leaped down from the tower. "Now, let's unleash our ultimate move." A window notification appeared, indicating that the limited time mission had been completed. As expected, he only completed about half of the related quest. He realized that perhaps his strength wasn't enough yet. He would try again when he was stronger, but he didn't know if the quest would even appear again. Lin Jiaying, standing beside him, looked bewildered. How could a healer lower than him achieve such a feat? Was there a bug? Just then, the blonde man chose to quit the game. He should have gone back to collect his reward, but Lin Jiaying stopped him. The man's strength in the 2 matches convinced her that he was the talent the Divergent Guild needed. So she asked him for his number, but he quickly realized he had been too abrupt. After all, who asks for a number upon first meeting? But the man told her that he had no interest in business matters and that he had already forgotten his number. He said he would give it to her if they met again. Then he turned and left. Lin Jiaying finally came to her senses. Had she been rejected? The scene shifted, and the man was now walking slowly down the street, still unable to recall his number. Had he just been accepted? Although the man could get his number first, the guild seemed too conspicuous, and he currently had no intention of joining. He then checked his status. His window level had increased by 2, and he had gained 1,500 GP points. Although the increase in divine power was quite good, such a small amount of GP was simply not enough to buy any sacred artifacts. It seemed he would have to search his sister's house thoroughly. The scene shifted, and the man returned home, but the pair of shoes that appeared before him instantly evoked countless memories. Everyone has moments of regret in their lives, and the man's biggest regret was not being able to protect her. In their past life, the two were each other's only support. Although he spent his days drinking, he never gave up on her, instead constantly encouraging her to be strong. But he failed to protect her properly, and that day became the most regrettable moment of her life. Now the man saw her again. "Long time no see, uncle. Inxia is the daughter of my sister and the Sword King. I didn't expect you to be back from your journey so soon." He replied that he was the only one who ended his journey early. After all, since his father joined the new guard of the Jew Kingdom, he only had his uncle left as family, so he was very worried about his uncle. "But hasn't your father contacted you?" Although he only told Inxia had fallen in love with someone, and for that, he was willing to abandon the entire country of H, even his daughter. Upon hearing this, the man was immediately furious, but he quickly calmed down, realizing that he was indeed that irresponsible. The scene shifts and the two are now chatting. Li Haiyan believes that Shang Jihan is a must-recruit for the guild. Just then, a notification on his phone catches his attention. A live stream appears before them, and they are utterly shocked, as it is Shang Jihan himself who is broadcasting. At the same time, he loudly announces to the audience that the Sword King is actually his sister. He then slowly raises his right foot, and in the next second he suddenly exerts force, shattering the ground and creating a crack. The man is now staring at the symbol of the Sword King. While everyone is still in shock, he has already swung his fist, destroying the massive Twinsword statue with a single blow. He will then state his position on the Sword King's joining the Star Guardian ceremony. He does this for a reason. Because Battle.net possesses the world's largest media outlet, earns numerous achievement rewards through viewers' clicks and attention. As the Sword King's brother-in-law, he undoubtedly enjoys the benefits. As notifications of completed achievements rang out, just as expected, Insurgent finally had his moment to shine. Simultaneously, a familiar black doubles-word symbol caught his eye, the symbol of the Sword King's family. They were all fervent fans of Sword King Insurgent. After the Sword King left H country, they pointed the finger at Xia, believing she had done something wrong that led to his departure. They believed that if he died, the Sword King would surely return. Ultimately, Xia met a tragic end at their hands. If you want someone to vent your anger on, then I'm happy to be that person. Immediately afterward, the man shattered the statue behind him with a single punch. The Sword King will never return. The man pulled out his phone. Let me tell you, he said, referring to his last conversation with his daughter since joining the Star Guard. Just as the man had said, Insurgent had abandoned, he then spoke, addressing the entire H country, even his daughter. Hello everyone, my name is Xia, the woman of Sword King Insurgent. Although the Sword King left this palace to me, I cannot accept the inheritance left by such a man. Therefore, I have decided to donate it to the country, hoping that the country can use this opportunity to cultivate more outstanding players. He will explain the details later. Just 30 minutes earlier, Xia had looked puzzled. She didn't understand why the man would donate everything he had worked so hard for. Although the man found it difficult to explain, only he knew that after Insurgent joined the Giant Kingdom, he helped the Giant Kingdom destroy the H country, which angered everyone in H country. As a result, the country confiscated all of Xia's property, leaving Xia homeless and even threatened by the Sword King's family, ultimately losing her life. Since she was going to lose this place sooner or later, she might as well gain people's support through a donation, which would be a guarantee for Xia, although she didn't understand why the man wanted to do this. But in the end, he chose to believe his uncle because he felt that his confident uncle had returned. Just as expected, the Sword King family's spearhead began to point at the man. But to ensure everything went smoothly, he began his speech again. Yun-Sijin, I think I did the right thing. Although on the surface you did it because of a woman, only I know that you fled to the Giant Kingdom because you were afraid you wouldn't succeed in the H Kingdom. Yun-Sijin, you're outdated. Since you're staying in the Giant Kingdom, enjoy the rest of your days, because I will see you soon and destroy everything you have. Just after the man warned the Sword King, Yun-Saya looked worried, because the man's words had caused a sensation throughout the world. More than that, she was curious about why the man seemed like a completely different person. After all, he had already experienced death once, so how could he still be the same as before? Just then, the doorbell rang, catching their attention. Who could it be at this time? Meanwhile, the Sword King had already learned of everything that had happened. The scene shifted, and a middle-aged man came to visit. The visitor was Park Yun-sik, the manager of the Battle.net department. Since the Sword King left, he had been taking good care of the two of them. Obviously, the man had expected him to come, so he gestured for him to get straight to the point. You've come to ask me to withdraw the donation from the Sword King's palace, right? After all, if the country accepts this donation, then, having acknowledged that the Sword King would not return, even the old man was surprised by the man's drastic change. As the man said, they hadn't completely given up on the Sword King. Therefore, He suggested a management arrangement transferring ownership to someone else on the condition that the Sword King would transfer ownership to him upon his return. It would be even better if the two could continue living there. He then presented the man with a contract, explaining that only in this way could both parties achieve a win-win situation. The man expressed his understanding, but before confirming, he had to agree to one condition. The scene shifts. The arena is now bustling with noise. At this moment, a figure, appearing before everyone, he landed on the ground with a magnificent display. He was none other than the streamer, Flowing Gold. Although he was loved by many viewers, his behavior was extremely despicable. As a gold-level player, he had voluntarily lowered his rank to the bronze-level competition, using his superior strength to toy with the bronze-level contestants. Just as he was deciding on his first victim, Shang Jihan suddenly appeared before him. He had long been curious about him, so he went up to interview him. However, the man ignored him and instead checked his status window. Just then, a notification popped up in his window. The Sword King clan had issued a bounty quest to kill Shang Jihan, with a reward of 2000 GP. Seeing that the golden light remained unmoved, the Sword King family kept increasing the bounty. Finally, he accepted the task for 50,000 GP. "Leave the rest to me," he said, gathering power in his legs. In the next instant, he was behind the man. Just then, the man turned and swung his staff, the powerful force instantly knocking the long sword from his hand. Then he pulled a short knife from his robes. The next second, a figure flashed past, instantly killing him. Player Shang Jihan achieved first blood, earning 100 achievement points. It seems his cooking skills have declined somewhat. Although the golden light was killed by the man's sword, it revived again in the next second. The resurrection cross can revive a user once, but it cannot be used in the National League. When it reappeared in a magnificent manner, the man was already behind it. With a slash, Shang Jihan successfully secured a double kill. He hadn't seen anyone use this item in a long time because it had a fatal flaw. However, today should be busy, since it's an official competition, so there will be spectators. This time, the spectators are elves. Their appearance disgusted the man because they accelerated the extinction of humanity. Although the man wanted to get rid of them immediately, he had to deal with the problems in front of him first. He slowly looked at the crowd, and the next second, everyone was terrified and fled in all directions because he was in existence even more terrifying than the golden light. Looking at the two holy relics in his hands, in order to get more missions and rewards, he could only choose to keep fighting. Just then, a mission came from the front: kill all the goblins present. This is perfect for me. Suddenly, the scene shifts, and the man launches a swift attack on the goblin. The goblin is struck down in the next instant, killed on the spot by a flash. At that moment, a notification sounds that the relics are reacting, indicating he now knows how to use them. Strike the enemy's head with a club, then attack their heart with a short sword. While knowing how to use the relics is commendable, the man has clearly wasted too much time. However, the story doesn't end there. The Goblin King suddenly appears before the man. The next second, the man knocked the Goblin King unconscious with a single blow, then raised his short sword and slashed straight at his heart, successfully killing the Goblin King and earning 500 achievement points. The man obtained the Divine Power Evil Gods cooking set, downgrading it from Drank to level 1. Although the level was lowered, the man could still absorb divine power from it. However, to win this match, he still needed to focus on the players. Since they were unwilling to approach him, he would approach them himself. Meanwhile, the Golden Light was furious because the audience was discussing how he was treated like trash. But only he knew that things were not as they imagined. It's simple because goblins have a combat ability of at least 35. Yet the man could easily kill them. The Bronze League's ability value is limited to around 25, making the man a formidable opponent. Just then, screams erupted on the screen, and the next second, the golden light froze in place. The situation was completely one-sided. Players were being killed by Shang Jihan at a visible speed. In no time, the man had eliminated all the participants in front of him. At this moment, the relic's level dropped from 1 to F. Killing 10 people in the arena rewards 5,000 achievement points. Although he gained a large number of achievement points and divine power, that wasn't enough for the man. Just then, a mission appeared before him, an epic quest to find the Shadow Queen in the arena and provoke her. Unexpectedly, an epic quest appeared in the Bronze League. The reward for completion was 50,000 achievement points. Note that the constellations were very interested in the Shadow Queen. They were sacred beings in battle.net. Completing their missions would grant a special ability. However, this was a mission typically found only in Diamond League matches. Since the opportunity had presented itself, the man couldn't let it slip by. If he could get a constellation on his side, other constellations would likely also be interested in him, but among so many elves, could he find the Shadow Queen? Just after the man single-handedly secured first place, major media outlets began reporting on him. This was the first record set since In Shizen's departure, and he instantly gained many fans. Those who were once fans of the Sword King became his supporters, while Golden Stream became the target of ridicule. His reputation was increasingly tarnished, but he didn't care at all, because he had also become a loyal fan of Shang Jihan and dreamed of becoming his exclusive editor. Meanwhile, at this moment, the two were chatting idly, pondering whether to accept someone's sponsorship. The man, however, was deep in thought. Although this epic mission seemed relatively simple, finding the right person in the crowd was undoubtedly harder than climbing to heaven. Just then, his uncle asked if he needed help, because his uncle always had this expression when things weren't going well. The man then explained his mission. He needed to find the Shadow Queen in the arena. Aside from knowing she was in the audience, the man knew nothing else about her. Although he didn't have many clues, he would try to find her by watching replays. Then he'll leave it to you, the man said. The scene shifted. The man returned to his room and opened his status window. It was time to perform the operation, add a new job slot. He used his achievement points to purchase a job slot, allowing him to add a new job. This time he chose the mage. As he pressed the confirm button, a purple energy instantly enveloped him. The next second, he could feel an energy different from divine power flowing through his heart. He had chosen the mage job for a reason. Only by possessing both the healer and mage jobs could he obtain a unique hidden attribute. It was power, and all this information came from Baron. Before his return, Baron would often confide in the man when drunk. His greatest pride was his unique attribute power. Power was a special attribute born from the combination of divine and magical power. Of course, no one else could control it, because he was the only human with two professions. Power contained the ability to manipulate space. Although Baron was previously the only human with power, things were different now, because the man would become the second being to wield it. Despite Baron's control over power, it was terrible, but he still secured his position as the world's #1 solely based on this special attribute. To change the fate of Earth's destruction, the man absolutely needed to master this power. For this, he had to endure the painful process of concentrating divine and magical power in his hand simultaneously. At the same time, a red energy ball was slowly condensing in his hand. Just when he thought he had succeeded, a powerful force instantly blasted him dozens of meters away. He had already exhausted all his magical power just from this first experiment. However, he had no way to keep the two energies converging in his hand indefinitely. Then, he suddenly thought of something. Even if he couldn't simultaneously gather two energies, if he synthesized them within his body, starting with the divine power in his upper dantian, mixing it with the demonic power residing in his middle dantian, and finally stabilizing it with the power of his lower dantianthan, the initial form of power would appear. All that remained was to compress it. Just then, a burst of red energy erupted from his body, attempting to unify the three dantians. A warning was issued. This exceeded the player's tolerance level, and their life was under threat. At the same time, Shia seemed to sense something amiss and hurriedly ran towards her uncle's room. The failure to unify the dantians was actually expected. Although the man had tried to compress and unify them by force, The conditions for merging the Dantians were extremely strict. He not only needed to be proficient in using 3 different energies, but the values also needed to reach at least 1. Above 00, if he rashly unified them, he might lose his life. Just then, Shurya burst into the man's room. When she asked him why he screamed, he made up an excuse about a headache. Shurya was terrified, afraid something might have happened to her uncle. However, after confirming that her uncle was all right, he said he would continue searching for the Shadow Queen and then turned and left. It seemed that the unification of the 3 Dantians had clearly failed because he lacked experience and level. However, this was not a big deal after all. He had obtained the power he wanted. Although he failed to unify the 3 Dantians, he fused divine power and demonic power to obtain strength. The bond between the 3 powers was very weak. Just then, the man noticed something strange. Why was the initial value of the strength 12? The notification from the window indicated that the values for martial power and strength were shared. If that were the case, increasing one attribute would also increase the other. This was fantastic. Just fusing 2 abilities had such an effect. What kind of boost would it have if 3 abilities were fused? However, for him at present it was clearly impossible. But now that he had obtained the desired attribute, it was time to try using magic. However, he seemed to have forgotten that he currently had no magic power. The scene shifted, and the man was now waking up from his sleep. After a night of absorption, his divine power had increased to 10 points. Now, he could no longer absorb holy objects below grade C. Meanwhile, after a night of struggle, Shia finally found a clue about the Shadow Queen. Someone, through their vision talent, discovered some new. They photographed the creature and uploaded it online. In the image, a dark elf caught their eye, and it was currently considered the most likely candidate to be the Shadow Queen. Although they had discovered some new information, the man felt things weren't so simple. Shia then told him he would continue organizing the information the next day, and even the man praised his professionalism. However, gazing at the broken photo frame beside him, the man fell into deep thought. Just 2 days ago, they had learned an important piece of information. The Sword King's new woman was named Shueha, and she possessed a 3th level talent and was an incredibly beautiful woman. Do you mean the Sword King was bewitched by this woman's talent? The man thought. Of course, that possibility cannot be ruled out. The older man then cautioned the man to be careful of this woman, because they speculated that her talent was likely of the mind control type. Given the Sword Kings, previously, many rising stars had suddenly joined the Giant Kingdom. If this talent had no limit on the number of uses, it would surely deceive powerful players again. Since that day, the man had been investigating information about the water crane, but without any results. If what the uncle said was true, then he had to be fully prepared because they might have already begun their actions. Just as the man decided to be wary of the Giant Kingdom, the scene shifted. Today was the auction of the former Sword King. The 2 were dressed in formal attire and heading towards the venue. Shia appeared very nervous, but the man told her not to be too nervous and to just present herself like she did during the last live stream. They hadn't done anything wrong and didn't need to care about other people's opinions. A moment later, they arrived at the venue. Just then, the uncle next to them called out to them, saying that everything was ready. Preparations were complete, and the man was ready to begin the auction. However, he was quite surprised, as he hadn't expected the man's condition to be an auction for the Sword King. Now, he finally realized the man's purpose to lure the Giant Kingdom here. Indeed, the man's initial goal was the Sword King, Een Shizen's exclusive connector, and all his combat data things the Giant Kingdom desired. The Giant Kingdom would undoubtedly try every means to acquire him. Based on current information, Een Shizen wouldn't be present, so this was a good opportunity for people to see reality. Even the uncle beside him was astonished, not expecting the man to have changed so drastically. This was their last chance to change public opinion. Therefore, the man instructed her to make sure the reporters paid close attention to the Star Guard's location. Just then, an argument broke out not far away. Shia immediately recognized them as his aunt and uncles. Although they tried their best to dissuade Xia from auctioning the Sword King's items, he saw through their intentions. They simply wanted to profit from the Sword King's reputation and had no right to interfere with Xia's actions. He then turned and walked into the auction hall. The scene shifted, and the two had just entered the hall when they were bombarded with photos by reporters. He simply raised a finger, and the next second numerous cameras exploded with clicks. At the same time, the man stood on the stage and began to speak, announcing that the auction would begin, and that 3 items would be auctioned. The items included, firstly, a connector specifically for Yoon Sejin, reducing pain in the game by 99, along with combat data. Secondly, data on Yoon Sejin's own analysis, and finally, research data on advanced players from other countries. The crowd began to discuss, seemingly unwilling to give up anything, as data on advanced players was not easily obtained. Just then, a right hand slowly rose. It was Takeda Kazuo from the Japanese New Guard, who offered 5 billion to buy everything here, as well as the opportunity to speak privately with Yoon Xia. However, this was met with resistance from the man. "No," she said. "If there's anything important, just say it here. The atmosphere isn't suitable for a private conversation." She hesitated, a hint of unease in her voice. "If you continue to show hostility, it could be dangerous." He was a bodyguard named Shadow. While he couldn't compare to the Sword King, he was still a very skilled player. The man was simply curious. Was this guy imitating Yoon Sejin? Just as Shadow pointed his sword at the man, a punch came hurtling towards him, leaving him momentarily stunned. Just as he was about to draw his sword, the man raised his hand to stop him. After all, this was a matter for the entire world to witness. Live broadcast. You probably don't want to use your long sword so casually in front of everyone, right? Meanwhile, Takeda Kazuo apologized to the man, but there was one thing he had to clarify beforehand: the 5 billion yen for buying everything included a private conversation with Yoon Seo, and he needed to know Yoon Seo's opinion on this. After all, he was the heir to the Sword King's fortune, so Yoon Seo should be the host of this auction. Furthermore, the conversation concerned the Sword King. Such a condition would be irresistible to anyone. However, Seo refused on the spot, as he had absolutely no interest in news about his father and believed it was better to follow his uncle's wishes. "Just do it," he said. Although somewhat disappointed by the rejection, he was still willing to spend 5 billion to buy everything here. He then took out an envelope from his pocket, the last letter the Sword King had written to Yoon Xia. Looking at the letter, Xia fell into deep thought. Meanwhile, Takeda Kazuo was urging the man to sign the contract quickly, but the man was caught in a dilemma. Before his return, Takeda Kazuo was someone banned from entering the country by country because he was very skilled at recruiting players from other countries, earning him the nickname the Scourge of the Giant Nation. He might be related to Shueha, and therefore the man had to improve. Be wary, but the situation is dire. If the Japanese take the Sword King's possessions, it will surely cause widespread discontent. Just then, Seo's words drew everyone's attention. The Sword King had heard that she had donated the Sword King Palace. Although he didn't know why Seo did it, it was the last inheritance she was left to him, and he hoped she would make good use of it. Also, their father-daughter relationship was over. There would be no more contact. It seemed this was indeed her handwriting. The man, meanwhile, fell into deep thought. That woman's abilities must be real. Although the man hated Yoon Sejin, he was at least a qualified, a reliable father. How could such a man abandon his daughter for a woman? Then, Xia tore the letter to shreds on the spot and had Takeda Kazuo relay the message. He was overjoyed to sever ties with his daughter. As he struggled with what to do with the shredded paper, the man effortlessly conjured it in midair. With a clenched fist, a burst of flame instantly consumed it all. Everyone was astonished, for he possessed not only warrior skills but also magic and divine power. Even Takeda Kazuo, standing nearby, was visibly excited. This man was definitely the talent the Giant Kingdom needed. The next second, everyone swarmed around the man, hoping he would join their guild. Just as he was looking bewildered, Xia suddenly collapsed to the ground. What happened? When he anxiously asked what was wrong, Xia explained that she was just acting, which would help her uncle escape the crowd. Only after confirming that Xia was truly all right did he breathe a sigh of relief. He then announced to the crowd that the auction would be adjourned today because his niece was unwell. He then helped Xia towards the door. At that moment, Takeda Kazuo apologized to him. He hoped the man would give him a chance to have a proper talk, but the card in his hand shattered instantly. That was his answer. However, Takeda Kazuo was visibly excited, certain that the man's power was immense. Although he was currently only a bronze player, he was certain he would become the strongest in the near future. The scene shifted, and with Seiya's help, the two quickly escaped the venue. Just then, a notification appeared ahead. Takeda Kazuo had donated 10,000 GP points. Unexpectedly, he had actually donated 10,000 GP points. This guy is really persistent. At the same time, a voice called out to them. Li Haiyan and Li Jiaying were walking towards them. Li Haiyan then introduced himself to the man. He was Li Haiyan, the head of the Human Resources Department of the Divergent Guild. He was happy to see the man, but the man felt that he looked very familiar. Both his demeanor and his confident attitude made the man feel that he had met him before. At this moment, an unintentional movement of Li Haiyan made the man freeze on the spot. He definitely knew this person. Then the man murmured, "When the world is full of potential, it will be hard to ignore it." This is a famous quote from Dostoevsky. Although he was a great writer, he was also a notorious gambler. And you like this quote, right? At this moment, Li Jiaying instantly stepped in front of him and then loudly questioned him. "How do you know Miss Motto?" It seems that he guessed right. In his previous life, he was Zero Baron Williams' agent. Although he was always a heavy drinker, his special talent led him to become the president of the second guild. The skill, originally only effective for experience buffs, expanded its scope after the tutorial ended, eventually reaching all areas. Among all players with this talent, Zero was the strongest. From Plum Blossom Sword to Zero, the Divergent Guild seemed incredibly powerful. Meanwhile, Li Haiyan coughed twice, "Let's end the jokes here," and then extended an invitation to the man. "The Divergent Guild needs someone like you. Let's have a detailed discussion sometime." It seemed his uncle finally had someone interested. Li Haiyan was basking in the joy of success. He had his eye on Jiaying. That's how he controlled men. But the next second, the man said he had long forgotten the number. Everyone froze in shock. Shurya, thinking her uncle was playing hard to get, cooperated with him. "It seems my niece isn't feeling well, so I've decided to." He left first but could take a business card. He would contact him if needed. Then he turned and left. Li Jiaying, standing nearby, was trembling violently, finding it incredibly difficult to suppress her laughter. Not long after the auction incident, the man returned to the Jiangnan Bronze League, this time tasked with defense. However, he appeared exhausted. Xia mistakenly believed the man liked Li Haiyan and thought she had messed everything up. Although this wasn't the case, the man didn't know how to explain it to her. Even he hadn't expected to see Zero again in this way. Before his return, he was a notorious gambler. Because of their shared experiences, their relationship grew closer. Although he enjoyed betting on football in his spare time, he hadn't won a single game because he never analyzed player talent. The scar on his face piqued the man's curiosity. Had he never considered removing it? He agreed, as it was the price of a deal with the devil. He then asked the man why he had only become strong now. If the man had been that strong back then, H country wouldn't have been destroyed, and his friends wouldn't have died. Aside from the fact that they were both from H country, they shared many similarities, one being the guilt of failing to protect the most important person in their lives, and the disgust for their own cowardice. Meanwhile, at this time, netizens, the viewers, seemed to notice something different about the man, for he was gripping a massive sword, a crank holy sword, the Uruk stone jar's horse-slaying saber. Its immense weight had made it incredibly cheap, but it didn't seem to bother him much. With a few swings, he quickly adapted to the weight. At that moment, the viewers started jeering, expressing their desire to see the man's status window. As his subscriber count grew, this request would likely become commonplace. However, the man hadn't yet achieved the subscription milestone, so he made a decision he would reveal his status window once he reached 200,000 subscribers, or if he failed to win first place in a future competition. Simultaneously, 3 beams of blue light descended beside the man, who was utterly astonished. Why did the 3 appear at the same time? A golden light, an unknown mage, and Diego Masitis was the first time the man had seen him in person. Before his return, he was a top player, but the man noticed something amiss. He was a healer, and there were already warriors and mages present. Therefore, he must be an archer. But he clearly remembered being a mage before his return. Why was he like this now? Meanwhile, the mage beside him already harbored deep hatred for the man because of what had happened before, causing him to lose his valuable skills. At this moment, he received a notification the Sword King family had issued a mission: destroy the crystal and prevent Shang Jihan from winning first place, with a reward of 50,000 GP. Then, the match started and Mazid kicked the ball first, initiating the attack. At the same time, he gestured to the man, asking him to cast buffs on them. Although he couldn't use it before due to insufficient divine power, he could now do it perfectly. With his chanting, everyone's attributes were boosted. Just then, the man asked the mage, "Will you play the game properly this time?" Of course, disobeying the man would result in being thrown off the tower. "Then he'll leave this to you." The man then leaped off the tower. While everyone was puzzled, the mage could no longer contain his anger. He wanted to see how long the man could last. At the same time, facing the numerous enemies before him, the man immediately used fire magic. After all, this was magic after awakening the power attribute, so even facing this group of enemies was no problem. With a surge of magical power, instantly, all the enemies were engulfed in blue flames. Then, the man swung his greatsword down, wiping out the remaining enemies in a second. Even those present were incredulous. Who exactly was Shang Jihan? Just then, a blood-soaked corpse lunged at the man, but he froze, unable to move. As expected, the power to manipulate space was incredibly strong in absolute domain. Anything entering this domain would be controlled by the user. Although others were unaware of this power, the man was very familiar with it, as Baron Williams often trained with him. Through training, the man gradually understood the power of force, and then, seeing the man coil flames around his greatsword before unleashing a powerful forward swing, an incredibly fierce blue flame instantly engulfed the entire land. Possessing 3 attributes, he was already an unmatched force in the Bronze League. This time, he was determined to achieve the achievement of slaying 1,000 enemies. The mission, accompanied by a figure weaving through the monster horde, was now solely focused on completing the quest. Even the 2 watching from the sidelines were astonished. This guy was ridiculously strong. At this moment, some netizens noticed that Golden Tortoise Crane seemed a bit off, so they gestured for Golden Stream to focus the camera on him. But the next second, he froze in place, because Golden Tortoise Crane was using fire magic, slowly walking towards the crystal, and then he turned towards the man. He launched into a tirade of insults, not only mocking him for being an orphan but also dragging Shia into it. The man could no longer remain calm. Was this guy courting death? Upon returning and seeing Shia again, the man was reminded of that unbearable past. In her final moments, to cover the damage the Sword King family had inflicted on her, Shia, wrapped in bandages, collapsed into the man's arms. But she was already lifeless. This was the thing the man regretted most in his life, yet he was powerless to change it. So, upon his return, he made a vow that such a thing would never happen again, because he would protect everything Shia had done. Upon gaining the power attribute, he discovered something strange: he could use the nameless divine skill. But because his martial arts level hadn't reached 30, therefore he could only imitate him. However, when mastering the power, he did feel a similar sensation to the nameless divine skill. At the same time, the man instantly entered the state, imagining electricity emanating from his feet. The next second, countless bolts of electricity burst forth from around him, and he would transform into lightning. This was the step that could shatter the sky, the flashing thunder step. Just as the golden tortoise crane was about to destroy the crystal, the appearance of the golden stream of light stopped everything. Although he signaled it not to meddle, in order to increase the number of subscribers, the golden tortoise crane, Se Liuguang declared he was determined to handle the matter. And the next second, Jin Gueha had already conjured a massive fireball, which he then launched directly at the crystal in front of him. Just then, a soccer ball blocked his attack. It was Diego Mazid. He vehemently opposed any behavior that disrupted the game and even hated those who insulted their teammates. So he had to stop Jin Gueha's actions. Upon hearing this, Jin Gueha was immediately enraged. But the next second, the man had already appeared behind him, seemingly having a lot to say. At this moment, she was terrified. But when she tried to speak, she found herself unable to utter a sound, for the man had already sealed her mouth. He had initially intended to carry her away immediately, but changed his mind. After all, the connector could significantly reduce pain. Even if she died, it would only result in a level drop, common knowledge. But from now on, the man would show her a different world. He then extended his right hand towards the golden tortoise crane. The golden tortoise crane had already lost all its skills. Although it didn't want to lose a level, it seemed it had angered the man. The next second, a sharp pain instantly filled its entire body, rendering it speechless. How can it be in pain already? I haven't even started. The golden tortoise crane was now engulfed in endless agony. Normally, using the connector in combat wouldn't produce such a drastic reaction. At this moment, Mazid reminded him to pay attention to what the man was holding. He had been treating the golden tortoise crane. Was this a side effect? Simply put, it was like a bug. If treatment continues while the user is in an abnormal state, an overload reaction will occur. When an overload occurs, the user will bypass the connector and bear 100 of the damage. He was very curious about how the man did it. He had missed it before. Only a few people who were proficient in martial arts could do it, channeling their energy into the enemy's body to tear muscles and shatter bones. At this moment, Jin Gueha hadn't figured out why the connector had malfunctioned when he was killed by the man's sword. Then news of Jin Gueha's death came. At the same time, the man looked towards the resurrection point. Even the golden light was terrified by the scene before him. The scene changed, and the familiar scene came into everyone's view. However, this time, before he could beg for mercy, news of his death came from ahead. It seems that he needs to adjust his power more next time. The next second, Jin Gueha was resurrected again, and the man was slowly walking towards her. A guy like you needs to. He was about to pay the price for his actions when a notification came from a head Shia was offering the man 10,000 GP. He hoped his uncle would stop, as the competition was the most important thing. After a moment's thought, the man decided to end the punishment. However, he wanted to know who had given him the courage to do this. The golden tortoise crane was terrified and blurted out everything a quest issued by someone from the 898 family named Sword King. Completing the quest to destroy the crystal would reward him with 50,000 GP. The man found this very strange. A normal person wouldn't spend 50,000 GP to issue a quest. It was likely a group. The man grabbed the golden tortoise crane, saying, "You should thank me properly. Yes, I spared you from those punishments," and then threw him over the tower. Player golden tortoise crane was dead, eliminated from the competition. Now, the man should focus on completing the quest. After all, if this hadn't happened, the man would probably have finished his mission long ago. But when he checked his status window, he found the mission was already complete. Could it have been caused by that lightning? The lightning generated during his jump had wiped out all the nearby enemies. It seemed to be a force beyond his control that caused it all. Ultimately, he hadn't used the nameless divine skill. This was truly shameful. It seemed he needed to practice more. The man then expressed his gratitude to Mazid, thanking him for protecting the crystal and promising to repay the favor. However, he needed to discuss something with him privately. Just then, an incredibly violent tremor shook the entire arena. As the man wondered what was happening, a giant hand suddenly appeared before them. Everyone felt that the giant hand was filled with an ominous aura. Accompanied by a monster's roar, it began devouring zombies. At the same time, the monster spat out several clumps of mud. The next second, a new monster suddenly appeared, and only then did the Golden Light realize that this was a monster that only appeared in the Gold League, capable of disintegrating flesh and reassembling it into new monsters. It was the Flesh Golem. Why was it here? Was it because of a special mission? Special Mission: The Origin of Zombies, Part 2. Without the help of crystals, clearing the Flesh Golem. Just as the man was filled with doubt, a notification came from ahead: you have completed the mission of defending 10 towers. An additional mission has been added to stop the Flesh Golem. The others were shocked. They hadn't expected an additional mission in the Bronze League: stop the Flesh Golem, created by the Destroyer Black Hand. The Legion, using the blessing of crystals, could narrow the gap in strength with the enemy. You don't really want to complete this mission, do you? These guys are extremely troublesome in the Gold League. Although the mission seemed impossible, the man still wanted to try. After all, besides achievement points, there were extra rewards. When this situation occurred, this alone was enough to show that this was at least an epic level quest. Just as everyone was discussing how to deal with these monsters, the man gestured for them not to act. Then, holding his holy sword, he slowly walked towards the monster. The flesh demon was like an immortal monster. Only by destroying its core could it be killed. However, because of its enormous body and hard shell, it was difficult to kill. More importantly, it was a gold-level monster. At the same time, the man muttered, "You two step aside." The next second, the man rushed towards the monster with lightning speed. When they came to their senses, only a deep footprint remained on the ground. Accompanied by the man slowly raising his sword, the man raised his holy sword, employing the most basic techniques of the nameless divine skill. The 3 powers and 5 elements, heaven, earth, and man, are the fundamental elements constituting the nameless divine skill. Based on this, it possesses the overwhelming force of Mount Tai. A single strike descended, instantly killing the target. The player even slew the fleshy golem, completing the 4th tower quest. Just as the man swung his sword to slay the fleshy golem, the Golden Light felt incredibly complex emotions: fear, despair, anticipation, and longing. All these emotions intertwined, ultimately forming respect. This was the first time in its life it had felt this way. That man would undoubtedly become a top-tier player, and it wanted to record everything about him. At the same time, the man appeared before them in a flash. From that moment on, his connection with Mazid began. Meanwhile, the other teams, utterly terrified, were instantly killed by the monster. In no time, only the man and his group remained in the arena. It seemed the mission rewards were quite good. They received triple experience and GP. The man then told Mazid that they could talk again sometime, as he wanted to tell him about talent. Mazid looked puzzled, but the man only told him it was related to magic and that they could discuss it in detail later. Does he want me to change my class to mage? Mazid wondered. If it were anyone else, he might not have cared, but Shang Jihan had displayed incredible strength, and perhaps there was a suitable profession for him. The two then agreed to discuss it further when they had the chance. Although the Golden Light also expressed a desire to join them, the man refused and immediately turned and left. The scene shifted, and the man received his mission reward and a hint for the next mission. An extra mission, Traces of the Disciple, would be available in the Silver League. However, although he obtained the crystal fragment, it greatly disappointed him. The divine blessing within the crystal was a high-level skill usable only by saints, capable of increasing all abilities by 50. This is an essential skill in top-tier leagues, but it's only usable in matches below silver rank. Meanwhile, his level has already reached 13. Although he needs to level up about 12 more times to participate in the Silver League, his current attributes are unmatched. Just as he was feeling puzzled, the holy sword beside him resonated, and divine power slowly gathered within the man's body. Strangely, however, his attributes didn't improve. At that moment, The holy sword issued a warning that it couldn't withstand the injected power and the device would be destroyed. It seemed the 3 streams of energy injected had gone out of control. To prevent even worse consequences, the man had to reabsorb the energy back into his body. Meanwhile, Takeda Kazuo was complaining that the plan had failed again. He was none other than the Sword King Family 898 who issued the mission. He had hoped to use this opportunity to see the man's status window, but unfortunately, he failed. If only he could succeed on the first try. It seemed he would have to keep a low profile for a while. Although Takeda Kazuo knew the man was a rare talent, his superiors made decisions based on facts. Therefore, to recruit him, Takeda Kazuo needed to obtain the man's status window and prove his value through the information it provided. It seemed time to use a special method, like with the Sword King, who received a 5 billion yen payment but could only drive a beat-up car to school, even getting into trouble because of it. After the energy went out of control, the man decisively chose to absorb it. After a moment of effort, the man calmed the energy. At the same time, a notification came from ahead that his martial arts strength had increased by 1 point. His martial arts strength had now reached 18. And just then, because his martial arts strength exceeded 17, therefore, from now on, men can only absorb divine power from level 1 or higher sacred artifacts. This is truly outrageous, as level 1 sacred artifacts are extremely expensive. It seems he can forget about increasing his divine power for a while. Just as the man was thinking this, Shia said that he had received a transfer of 5 billion. But why are you in this state? Although he said that nothing had happened, Shia didn't believe him. She then went to treat his wounds. There was really nothing she could do with him. The scene changed, and the two went to a barbecue restaurant to have dinner together. This was the first time the man had a proper meal since his return. Shia thought that the two of them should at least have a casual meal together because he was going back to school. After all, as the student council president, it would be very bad if he kept resting, and the day to receive his talent was approaching. Only then did he remember that August 22nd was Yoon Sea's 18th birthday, and also the day he received blessings and gained a talent. Although he hoped to obtain a good talent to change his terrible situation, he only obtained an level talent. At that moment, Seiya, who had been strong for so long, finally broke down. If he told him the truth, he would definitely be very disappointed. So the man could only lower his expectations slowly. But he was going back to school starting tomorrow, right? Seiya agreed. So starting tomorrow, he would drive Seiya to school. Although Seiya was a little confused about his uncle's actions, he finally agreed. The scene changed, and the two of them were now stunned. The underground parking garage was completely empty. So many supercars used to be parked here, but now they were all gone. They suddenly remembered, had they disposed of them? Just as the two were at a loss, a dilapidated car next to them caught the man's attention. It was Seiya's mother's car, so those people had no right to. After dealing with this, the man immediately started the car. Although the car was quite old, it still seemed usable. A moment later, they arrived at the Battle.net Academy. At this moment, a large man was angrily shouting at them, "Move the car immediately." Although the man knew that this beat-up car would attract attention, he didn't expect it to arrive so quickly. He then slowly got out of the car, careful with his words, as he was also a student's guardian. Just then, the two people beside him realized that the person in front of them was Shang Jihan. They took a picture and uploaded it online, instantly sparking a lot of discussion among netizens. On the other side, Li Haiyan gave instructions to Li Jiaying that they were going to the Battle.net Academy. Then he began to dress up. After all, Shang Jihan had refused his invitation last time, and this time he had to get his revenge. Just you wait, Shang Jihan. He only appeared on the competition field, but he made everyone tremble because he had once killed a gold-level monster alone, and now he appeared. This was simply a case of dimensional reduction in power. Just as the man and the big guy were about to clash, the next second, a punch came hurtling towards the man's face. Everyone was shocked, because the enormous fist stopped right in front of the man's nose. He tried to struggle, but found he couldn't even open his mouth. The man raised his hand and slammed it to the ground, then began to berate him. As a student's family member, how could he be so rude? Even if he couldn't set a good example, he shouldn't have shown such rudeness. Just then, a voice called out to Yoon Seo. It turned out to be Seo's classmate, Kim Hee-ju. They seemed to have a good relationship. But when he saw that Seo was riding in such a dilapidated car, he immediately offered to pick her up and take her home after school. The man was a little confused. Did Seo really have such a good friend? Felt strange. A moment later, when Lee Haein and the others arrived, they found that Shang Jihan had already left. He was grumbling and venting his frustrations, fearing Shang Jihan would join another guild. At the same time, he saw a live stream of Shang Jihan competing, and he instantly made up his mind from now on, he would keep a close eye on him. The scene shifted, and Shang Jihan was already clenching his right fist. The next second, he punched an enemy flying, followed by a powerful right kick. Then he slowly gathered energy, unleashing the nameless divine skill, the Thunder Step. The next second, a bolt of lightning flashed through the crowd, instantly wiping out all the enemies present. It seemed he was increasingly mastering this power. Just then, two people nearby began to discuss. Isn't that Shang Jihan? It said he single-handedly defeated a gold-level flesh demon in the Bronze League. Encountering someone like him in the Bronze League is like a bolt from the blue. With the announcement of the match's end, the man had once again won first place. Having won first place 5 times in a row, his experience points and GP had increased by 200. And because he had reached level 15, the dungeon in the game was unlocked, which was fantastic. He hadn't expected to unlock the dungeon so quickly. The dungeon is a dungeon that unlocks after reaching level 15. There, you not only need to fight, but also deal with traps, mazes, and puzzles. However, one person's ability is limited, so it's generally recommended to team up to conquer the dungeon. But currently, too many people are eyeing him. If a team targets him after entering the dungeon, it will be a huge problem. Although he had a slight idea of joining a guild, he decided against it. After all, leaving a guild later wouldn't be so easy. Now all he could do was wait. When he reached the silver rank, he would create his own guild. He had only smelled a familiar aroma, yet he was willing to gamble his entire life on it because he was certain that Lee Haein was 0. The man needed to confirm whether his talent had changed. Right after finishing the Bronze League, he was having breakfast with Inshuria.Toshia's surprise. Her uncle's cooking skills were excellent, all thanks to the daily meals he had prepared. However, she wondered if she would be riding in her friend's car every time. Shia gave a negative answer, as his enthusiasm made her feel a little uncomfortable. From the moment she got in the car, he inquired about her well-being, which sounded somewhat unpleasant. Furthermore, Shia found her mother's car very warm and inviting, a feeling shared by the man. The scene shifts and the man drives to the Battle.net Academy. To his surprise, Lee Haein and the others are already waiting, though their expressions are somewhat serious. When asked why they are there, he explains that he arrived early. Shia, being quite perceptive, quickly says she has to go to school and asks if she can spare some time. It was getting late. After a short while, the two went outdoors. However, there were many people watching, so the man was a little uncomfortable. Then Lee Haein got down to business. Shang Jihan was the first man he had to chase, so he had prepared a good plan for him, a platinum-level contract. Upon hearing this, the people around immediately felt that their own guilds were doomed, because he had played his trump card right from the start. Even the man was incredulous, not expecting that he had made such thorough preparations. The reason he proposed this plan was to express his feelings for Shang Jihan. Upon hearing this, Li Jiaying, who was standing nearby, instantly understood everything. This was all part of his plan, whether it was to deal with other guilds or to win over Shang Jihan. At this moment, the man was incredulous because the scent on him was exactly the same as Zero's. Now he was finally certain that Lee Haein was 0. However, he was curious whether his talent had been affected. Suddenly, he remembered that he couldn't just give without receiving anything in return, so he asked the man for his number. But the man responded by saying, "How about we make a bet?" Because he had already reached level 15. So his first dungeon will be the dungeon. The two men looked shocked. They hadn't expected him to unlock it so quickly. What was the wager? If he didn't get first place in the dungeon, he would join the Divergent Guild and hand over his number. Were they going to conquer the dungeon alone without joining any guild? Many people would be watching them. Wasn't it worth a try? What kind of wager should he place? If he won, he would check Li Haiyan's status window to see if Li Haiyan's talent had changed. At this point, cultivation was still just experience. For others, it was a very awkward talent. However, judging from his expression, his talent seemed unchanged, but he still needed to confirm it personally. After both sides agreed on the bet, the man immediately entered the battle network. His game would end soon, accompanied by a blue light. This game was the dungeon, the Tomb of the Sage. He only defeated the lowest level guard in the tomb, yet he shocked everyone present because he displayed strength that rivaled even bronze level players. Just after the man entered the battle network, a notification appeared ahead. The Tomb of the Sage is of high difficulty. Many monsters will appear in this dungeon, but there are almost no complex mazes or traps. However, its high difficulty rating is for a reason. To successfully complete this dungeon, the entire team must survive to the end. Therefore, in this dungeon, having a suitable team is crucial. At the same time, the game started, and 3 team members appeared before the man. They not only had excellent equipment but also belonged to the same guild, Black Hawk Guild. Clearly, they were very excited about having Shang Jihan as a teammate and believed they could definitely take first place. The man immediately offered to clear the way for them. Although they expressed some concern, he assured them not to worry, as he was confident in his abilities. Fortunately, there were no orcs this time, otherwise cleaning their clothes would have been a real headache. So, let's begin the raid. Following the map, the man and his group quickly arrived at the first basement level of the dungeon. There, numerous guards were slowly emerging from the ground. The tomb's guardians stood before them as everyone was stunned. They discussed using magic to clear a path, but the man beside them immediately stopped them, gesturing for them to simply follow him. The next second, numerous guardians attacked the man, who nimbly dodged all attacks, then instantly shattered a guardian with a single punch. A figure flashed past, and all the guardians on the path were cleared. There were 10 paths leading to the ruler's tomb, each cleared by a small team. All paths ultimately led to the 7th underground level, the boss's room. At this moment, Shang Jihan's team was displaying overwhelming strength. In first place, their team quickly reached the 3rd underground level. Even those present were incredulous, as the powerful tomb guardians were like sand before the man. Meanwhile, Takeda Kazuo donated 10,000 GP to the man. What was this guy doing? It seemed like he was desperately trying to win him over. When asked if he planned to leave, he said he had no interest whatsoever, and then immediately silenced Takeda Kazuo. Before they knew it, they had conquered the 3rd underground level. The teammates apologized profusely, saying they hadn't been of any use and wished they could continue working with the man. But this one sentence instantly aroused the man's suspicion. A moment later, they arrived at the 4th underground level, only to find it was a straight line. Judging from the holes in the walls and facade, there were many hidden traps here. It seemed that all the traps were concentrated on this floor. Then the man said that he could speed things up here. Of course, no problem. This time, the man still led the team. As he slowly walked inside, everyone had already made up their minds, because Sword King family number 787 had issued a mission. As long as the mission to eliminate him was completed, a reward of 1 billion would be given. At this moment, Takeda Kazuo was watching the live broadcast with a relaxed expression. Shang Jihan, what should you do now? The mission he issued, many people had already accepted the task, but they would never show it. This meant that from the moment the action began, he was destined to fail. In this game where death meant defeat, everyone raised their weapons. Because they had received a special mission to prevent Shang Jihan from winning first place, they would receive a reward of 1 billion. The moment the man began his action, several arrows flew towards them. Just as the mage was about to use magic to eliminate them, the man gestured for him not to act. With a wave of his hand, all the arrows were stopped in midair. This was an absolute domain possessing the power attribute, and everyone was utterly shocked. What kind of power was this? Meanwhile, the mage noticed two lagging members of the group, pointing their weapons at him. Were they trying to kill him? The man immediately turned around. Just as the mage cast a spell to stop them, a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed through the passage. By the time everyone recovered, the man had already knocked their weapons out of their hands with a single punch. Then, with a flick of his wrist, the two men were forced to the ground by an invisible force. This was incredibly dangerous. It almost ended, but luckily the man stopped it in time. The two then started blaming each other. Did you also take that mission? Shut up. Didn't you see? At the same time, the man learned why they had done this. It seemed they had all accepted the same mission. If one of them died, the game would end immediately. This was incredibly shameful. As a member of the guild, he felt very apologetic. But the man said he didn't need to apologize at all because he, like the other two, was a member of the Black Hawk Guild. All the members present had accepted the mission. As for Shang Jihan, how did they find out? It all started with the golden light. From the beginning of the competition, he had been observing everyone's every move. At that time, he noticed that Sword King family number 989 had issued a special mission to complete the mission of self-annihilation and receive a reward of 1 billion. So he chose to donate 10 million GP to inform the man. Although donating 10 million GP was a bit painful as a loyal fan of Shang Jihan, this was nothing. With the man waving his finger, the mage fell to the ground the next second. No matter how much that person hated me, but spending 1 billion on a single task seems a bit too extravagant. Most people couldn't afford that. Therefore, he concluded that this guy must have at least a powerful patron or some specific force behind him. So who could this person be? It seems this guy really wanted to see the man's status window, so the man decided to change his promise. He increased the number of subscribers to 1 million, while maintaining his promise to win every competition. From his expression, it's clear he thought this was a good thing. After all, he had worried that the 200,000 subscriber mark would be reached quickly. Now he no longer had to worry about that. Then, he bound everyone together and led them to the next floor. The scene shifted, and everyone looked shocked as a continuous stream of guards slowly approached them. He simply clenched his fist and instantly shattered all the tomb guards. This was the legendary absolute domain, a space completely under his control. As the man led everyone to the next floor, they expressed their dissatisfaction. Was this guy really on the same level as them? And just 10 minutes earlier, although Shang Jihan stopped them on the spot, they were still very dissatisfied. The next second, the man quickly tapped several points on his body, and he collapsed weakly to the ground. He was shocked. Was this the legendary pressure point technique? That was something only top martial artists could do. Damn it, wasn't he a healer? How could he do this? At the same time, he suddenly remembered Shang Jihan, who seemed very sensitive about his niece's situation. But just as he was about to speak, Shang Jihan stopped him, saying, "Just shut up." Then he dragged everyone to the next floor. The scene changed, and Shang Jihan and the others arrived at the 6th basement level. Facing the siege of numerous guards, he seemed somewhat surprised, as the number far exceeded his expectations. While he was still stunned, the guards launched their attack. The man instantly swung his sword to defend, then tossed everyone behind him. A figure flashed past, and in a flash the man wiped out the guards. At the same time, a violent tremor emanated from the underground tomb. The next second, an overwhelming horde of guards slowly approached the man. Looking into their golden eyes, these creatures were completely different from the previous guards. Just then, a mission notification appeared ahead: eliminate all guards. Reward 1,000 achievement points. This was fantastic. The man then raised his hand, casting a shield around everyone, and then raised his long. The sword struck the shield, for only shields enhanced with strength would become truly sturdy. Now it's your turn, the man said. The next second, he unleashed an absolute domain, a power he wielded with practiced ease. Anything entering his domain slowed considerably. He could shatter them instantly with a mere clench of his fist. This was the space he controlled. It was unbelievable that Baron used it only to enhance his magic. Simultaneously, the man slowly raised his long sword, and a sword aura swept across the ground. A notification appeared ahead: you have completed a special mission. He had merely knelt reverently before the boss. Yet this had allowed him to clear the 7th underground level. The return passage opened effortlessly. Having single-handedly cleared the 6th underground level, the man now arrived at the final boss's room on the 7th level. The boss murmured, "Welcome, raiders. Gold is something that will ultimately be stolen. I will give you everything you desire. The condition for clearing the 7th level is to bow in respect to me, and all team members must participate." Then, four beams of white light appeared before the boss, and they were required to kneel within these beams. Immediately afterward, the man released them from their restraints with a wave of his hand. The next second, the man suddenly opened his eyes, and everyone involuntarily floated forward. This was because the man's combat power had reached 18. This led to a significant increase in the area and effect of the absolute domain. At the same time, with a command from the boss, Shang Jihan controlled everyone to slowly kneel before him. That should be the end, the boss thought, clearly satisfied with their kneeling. He then opened the passage back for them. Although they had lost 10 billion in rewards, winning first place was still quite good. The magician beside him was very curious as to why Shang Jihan remained silent. They didn't know that just moments ago, Shang Jihan had received a special mission to show true respect to the ruler. The reward was 5,000 achievement points and the ruler's sword. 5,000 achievement points was already an astonishing reward, but the ruler's sword was even more surprising. Is that huge thing also my reward? True respect? At this moment, the man couldn't help but consider the magician's actions. While the magician was still in a daze, the man simply raised his hand and absorbed the magician's sword. "The king of plunderers, this is my true respect for you," the man said, tossing the magic stone in his hand. The moment it touched the warhorse, a player death notification sounded. While everyone looked on in confusion, the boss, now showing interest, asked, "The king of raiders, are you referring to me?" Of course, the man replied, "This is my sincerest respect for you. Aside from the gold, I want something truly valuable, like that sword in your hand, the ruler's sword. Only by taking it from the boss can I show my true respect, and it's also the only way to complete this special quest." Hearing this, the boss found it very amusing and praised the man's bold move. "I will bestow my treasure upon you because you have shown me the sincerest respect. I will accept it with gratitude. Then try to catch it, my phoenix sword." The man simply swung his sword, but it shocked the boss. With a single strike, he instantly destroyed the boss's artifact. Just as the boss was about to hand over the phoenix sword, the man was preparing to receive the blow when a wave of heat rushed towards them. The extreme heat even caused them to spontaneously combust. The situation had become tricky. It seemed they couldn't hold on much longer. Although their deaths were irrelevant, the man's weapon would vanish the moment they died. Therefore, he had to resolve the matter before that happened. At that moment, the intense heat instantly melted the gold coins scattered on the ground, and even his teammates had to carry 2 of them away. The man's intuition told him he couldn't possibly withstand the phoenix sword. The only breakthrough, all that remained was the longbow in his hand. Before he could release an arrow, the man had to destroy the longbow. Long, long ago, a lost man was shown a sage who guided him on a path. Thus, the 3 talents martial arts came to the mortal realm, its most important elements being precision and incredibly fast thrusts. The man thrust his sword forward, and the boss reacted instantly. But the next second, a strike from the immortal's guidance struck, instantly destroying the longbow. Even the boss was shocked. "What's your name?" the man asked. He replied, "My name is Shang Jihan. You are a very outstanding warrior." Immediately afterwards, he presented the phoenix sword to the man. You have shown me enough respect, so this phoenix sword is yours, Raider Shang Jihan. I look forward to our next meeting, and so do I. Then, the boss slowly dissipated into the air. After some testing, the man found it quite handy. By removing the feathers at the back, it could be used as a long feather weapon. Meanwhile, netizens were buzzing with discussion, because even in slow motion, they couldn't discern what the man had done. This was inevitable. The Immortals Guiding the Way technique was not only incredibly fast but also as elusive as sword energy, making it increasingly difficult to grasp. The more proficient he became in using the nameless divine skill, the more adept he became, despite initial discomfort and excessive energy expenditure. At this rate, he would soon master it completely. Meanwhile, news arrived that the man was exempt from the 7th underground level test. Now, it was time to deal with the remaining team members. Suddenly, the man swung his spear, and in his horrified gaze, a figure flashed by. Then, a notification sounded the team member had perished. He had only brought back a weapon from the dungeon, yet this had shocked everyone. After conquering the 7th underground level, the man returned to Earth with the Phoenix Sword. Much to everyone's astonishment, he had obtained it from the Bronze Dungeon. But you all watched the live stream, right? I got first place again. So, as agreed, you'll show me your status window. But before that, he demanded the man put down his spear, as it radiated immense power. The scene shifted, and Li Haiyan showed the man his status window. The man was unusually excited. As expected, Li Haiyan possessed the talent of cultivation, but he seemed to dislike it intensely. After all, he had spent a great deal of effort trying to acquire the talent, only to find it useless. He even thought he shouldn't have gone to that academy in the first place. At this moment, the man smiled, clearly pleased. He then pulled out his phone and asked Li Haiyan for his number. But I lost. Didn't I? What does this mean? Li Haiyan replied, Nothing, I just want a number. But my number was on that business card. Wasn't it? I lost that thing a long time ago. He was puzzled by the man's actions. Was he interested in cultivating talent? He then entered his number into the phone. He typed code, then turned and left. The scene shifted, and everyone was watching the man's progress log. Yes, your uncle is getting stronger and stronger. Kim Hee-soo, standing nearby, seemed a little unhappy upon hearing this. However, in their memory, the man had been quite disheveled just a few months ago. They hadn't expected such a dramatic change. Meanwhile, Seo-ju reminded Seiya that the day was approaching, her 18th birthday, the day she would gain her talent. The classmates began to speculate that Seiya would at least obtain an S-level talent. After all, her father was a sword king with a 3S-level talent, and her mother was a double S-level talent. The saintess of the first rank and his uncle, who has been very active recently, possesses at least S-rank talent. However, Shurya believes that talent has nothing to do with bloodline. Nevertheless, Shurya is still somewhat nervous about the fact that his talent is about to awaken. But Shiju, who is beside him, tells him not to worry because he will give him a gift, so he must accept it. On the other side, a student suddenly collapses to the ground. Sword King instantly knocked down several people with his powerful strength. Data shows that Sword King is even stronger than before, and all his abilities have been greatly enhanced. They are very much looking forward to it. What kind of performance will Sword King deliver in his first competition after joining the Star Guard? A seemingly ordinary soccer ball has propelled him to become the world's strongest mage. Meanwhile, after Shang Jihan won the bet, Li Haiyan was in a state of turmoil. His father was demanding he get married as soon as possible, but he had absolutely no interest in this arranged marriage. What angered him most was that he had expected his blind date to be that fat guy from the Star Guard team, but it turned out to be a bald old man. Being wealthy doesn't solve everything. Aren't you going home to rest? He asked. He gave a negative answer. After all, he felt that staying here, it would be more comfortable there. He then apologized to Lin Jiayin, explaining that with his SG talent, he could have made a name for himself in the online gaming world, but he had wasted his time protecting Li Haiyan. However, he maintained that it was all voluntary, and he would protect Li Haiyan until he inherited the entire group. At that moment, Li Haiyan immediately stated that he would leave his family as soon as possible and create wealth with his own hands. Is your way of creating wealth investing in gambling? This time it's different. I'm confident of winning. You mean the match between H country and Ju country? That's a very safe bet. After all, most people in H country believed that the stubborn country would win this competition. At the same time, Shang Jihan sent a text message to Li Haiyan, and the content of the message even stunned him on the spot. The scene changed, and the man was warmly entertaining Diego Mazid with barbecue. After a few rounds of drinks, he began to reveal his feelings. He was originally a world-class football star, but because of the emergence of Battle.net, his popularity plummeted in an instant, and he even ended up with a broken family. Shang Jihan knew this very well. He was originally a household name in football, but because of the emergence of Battle.net, people's perception of sports, gradually interest waned, and eventually people forgot about football. However, he was curious why Shang Jihan wanted him to become a mage. Because of his talent, he could enhance all items similar to football, right? Of course, whenever he used something similar to football, he would receive a 300x bonus. But he couldn't become a mage at all because his mana was ridiculously low. At the same time, the man immediately summoned an item, Arachne's Orb, the magic ball used by the Spider Clan's Arachne, characterized by its extreme elasticity. This was the most suitable equipment for him. So, what special thoughts do you have? After all, in his previous life, he was the most powerful magician in the world. Although he desperately wanted to possess it, the exorbitant price made him hesitate. However, the man had already planned to give it to him, because he had only one purpose in coming here to invite Mazid to join his guild. But, can you afford the price of this equipment? Of course, because I will soon earn more rewards. On the other side, Li Haiyan stared at the information in his hand, lost in thought, because Shang Jihan had told him the specific scores. The stubborn country would crush the H country with a score of 31. At the same time, the Sword King slowly walked onto the competition stage. Next, H country and stubborn country are about to engage in a fierce duel. The Sword King merely swung his sword lightly, yet he shocked everyone present, for he had pierced his own chest with the sword on the spot. Just as the match between H country and Japan began, Shang Jihan placed his bet with Ma Shida. Surprisingly, H country had won the first match. Ma Shida was skeptical of this result after all. Stubborn country had its strongest Sword King, who possessed overwhelming strength. Then the man pointed to the screen. Let's witness it for ourselves and see what happens. The scene shifted, and the match officially began with the rules. The competition consists of 5 rounds. The first to win 3 rounds will be the winner. Sword King then instructed the crowd to follow him closely, but they refused. They didn't intend to obey Sword King's commands because his participation had forced their guild leader to leave the competition. Yet Sword King showed no remorse. Simultaneously, a beam of light descended from the sky, striking Sword King directly. It turned out that the participants from H country had launched the first attack. Just as everyone decided to launch a final assault on Sword King, he suddenly swung his sword, instantly repelling them. At that moment, everyone was filled with disbelief, because the Sword King had personally pierced his own chest. Since you refuse to obey my commands, then there's no need for me to participate in this match. The next second, news arrived that Country H had secured the first kill. Everyone was extremely shocked, even Mazid. He was very curious about how Shang Jihan knew about this, but the man declined to comment, saying to focus on the match. As expected, Country H quickly won the first match. Due to the Sword King's unexpected actions, Country H's Li Jinhua was awarded MVP. Meanwhile, everyone was expressing their dissatisfaction with the Sword King's behavior. After all, as a representative of a team, how could he act so publicly? This was utterly disgraceful to the team, and Sword King responded, "I can't tolerate your childish behavior. You're a bunch of unprofessional trash. I don't want to waste my time on you. If you can't acknowledge me as captain, then I will never participate." Either win with me, or continue to experience defeat like before. Ultimately, they reluctantly chose the former. With the start of the second round, Sword King once again stood on the field. Was he going to repeat his mistakes? But they quickly sensed something was wrong, because this time the aura was completely different. Just as they were preparing to defend, the next second, a sharp slash instantly struck, carrying away 2 members of the team. Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, was this guy finally going to get serious? He had only won the bet, yet he had shocked everyone present because he had accurately predicted the score between the 2 teams. After the Sword King revealed his true strength, he instantly killed the 2 people in front of him with a single sword strike. In just 2 attacks, the Sword King had tied the score between the 2 teams. The scene quickly moved to the 4th round of the competition. In the previous round, the Sword King had overwhelmed everyone with his overwhelming strength. But this round was not so simple. The warriors launched an extremely fierce attack forced even the mage to use all his skills. In no time, the Sword King was firmly bound by chains. But just as everyone was about to surround him, the Sword King suddenly released his grip on the long sword in his left hand and immediately blocked the warrior's attack. As the warrior looked on in confusion, the Sword King suddenly exerted his strength, instantly sending the warrior flying. The mage, who was trying to reinforce the chains, saw the Sword King already in front of him, delivering a swift and deadly slash that carried him away. Just as 2 team members were about to offer assistance, the Star Guardians stopped them, saying, "Don't underestimate them." I'm speechless. At the same time, the Sword King had already flown to him on his sword, arriving before him. "You lot are truly a rabble. Did you join the giant kingdom just to show off? Sword riding does look cool, though. If only your abilities were as impressive as your words." Upon hearing this, he immediately unleashed all his energy, followed by a torrent of lightning power. "This is fantastic. Perfect for testing my latest research skill." As the Sword King raised his long sword, a giant sword descended from the sky, instantly blasting the arena apart. While everyone stared in disbelief, the Sword King, single-handedly, secured the championship with a 31 victory. Meanwhile, Mazid, who was watching the match, was utterly shocked. "How did you know the score so precisely?" The man simply told him it was all from a dream. Although he had earned a considerable amount through this, something had surprised him. Compared to his previous life, the Sword King seemed even more powerful. Even with the nameless divine skill, the man couldn't easily defeat him, especially since the Sword King possessed a 3th-level item. But it didn't matter much. No matter how powerful the Sword King became, he only needed to become stronger. His day would come soon. He had only given away an ordinary. Despite his football skills, he gained the trust of the strongest mage and joined the guild without hesitation. After the match, Li Haiyan was extremely shocked because he had indeed won and earned over 200 million. However, in the final settlement, he lost over 20 million because he had previously placed an additional bet, believing that Japan would win 30 against each country. He had bet 200 million on this, and in the end, he lost over 20 million. Meanwhile, the man gifted the magic ball to Mazid and extended a cooperation invitation to him. Mazid was puzzled as to why the man would take a liking to an unknown nobody like him. Could it be? Is he really that valuable? Of course, I believe my choice is correct. The man then pushed the magic ball in front of him. "I believe you will become the most powerful mage. This gift is the greatest affirmation of your future. I need you." Upon hearing this, Mazid immediately fell into deep thought, because no one had said such words to him in a long time. He missed this feeling very much, and now, Shang Jihan's appearance had brought him hope again, so he had no reason to refuse the invitation. "I look forward to cooperating with you, President. I will do my best to meet your expectations. I look forward to your performance." The scene shifts to the Bronze League. Lin Jiaying fought her way through the competition, and just as 2 other contestants attacked her, she swiftly and elegantly dispatched them. A notification then came from ahead. Lin Jiaying had won first place in the match. While this was a good result, it wasn't enough for her. She needed to become stronger. Compared to the reigning champion Sword King and the rising star Shang Jihan, she was still far behind. She had to put in even more effort. Meanwhile, Shurya, looking at the message on her phone, felt extremely disappointed. Although Jin Shiju expressed her concern, she maintained a facade of strength. Just then, a sudden stop interrupted their conversation. Before them stood a large group of reporters. Meanwhile, the man was rushing towards Xia, leaping and feeling a significant improvement in his physical abilities. To find Xia, he needed to reach the highest point in the city. The scene shifted, looking down at the bustling crowd below. Shang Jihan couldn't help but reminisce about the past. In his previous life, he had often stayed in high places. Now, he realized just how strong Yin Shizhen was at this time. Although Shang Jihan had never fought him, after all, when Earth began to face destruction, he was ranked. The Sword King suddenly disappeared. Although he didn't know what had happened, he was certain that the Sword King at this time was as powerful as he was at his peak in his previous life. Therefore, he was definitely stronger than before and would master the nameless divine skill faster. On the other side, the uncle was trying his best to stop the crowd's behavior, but they were still relentless, even believing that the Sword King's current state was due to Shurya's existence. Just as things were about to escalate, the man slowly walked towards the crowd. As he gathered magic power in his hand, the next second, everyone was instantly repelled by a mysterious force. How dare you lay a hand on a reporter? Aren't you afraid of the pressure from the internet? Of course I care, so I've been very restrained. This is the first time, so I choose to forgive you. You should be grateful you're still alive. He then told Seiya that everything was all right and it was time to go home and thank them again. The man then helped Seiya leave. Meanwhile, Seoju could no longer hide her joy and burst into laughter. Only then did everyone realize that he was Kim Hee-soo, the granddaughter of the chairman of the Taiyuan Daily. It seemed Seiya was completely finished now. Meanwhile, the Sword King actually publicly announced he had no daughter, which seemed to be the reason why reporters swarmed to him. Shang Jihan was furious, but he didn't know how to calm Shurya down. Just then, Shurya suddenly asked, "Does the wish you promised me still stand? You mean finding the Shadow Queen?" He affirmed, then pulled out his phone. "Yes, I found the Shadow Queen," he exclaimed. He had only broken through one barrier, but it instantly ignited the excitement of netizens. He was the first to break the rules, and that barrier was a special one used in the competition, capable of withstanding all attacks from diamond-level players. After finding the Shadow Queen, Shurya posted, he expressed his opinion that he was the most likely candidate. Compared to the Elf Queen sitting on the throne, he felt that he was more like the Shadow Queen. He then sent the picture to his uncle. First, there was his eye. The whites of his eyes were black, which was a very rare occurrence. Secondly, there was another strange thing before the competition started. He always stared intently at the first-place winner, and he observed his uncle during each competition. So, he specifically checked the records of each competition and found that everyone he observed ultimately won first place, as if he could see the future. And more importantly, there was another point. The shadow beneath his feet, though blurry due to poor image quality, was something he sensed was amiss. It seemed to be a significant discovery. He thanked Xia and decided to confirm it during the next match. "What is your wish?" he asked. "Whatever you say, I will grant it. My wish is..." The scene shifted, and the man returned to the arena. Today, he would break with convention, smash through the barrier in the stands, and confirm the identity of the elf, to see if she was indeed the Shadow Queen. In no time, he had achieved 10 kills, enough to keep him in first place. So, the next step is to find a way to break through this barrier, but that's not an easy task. After all, his strength is equivalent to a diamond-level player, and he can block all skills and attacks. Even the Wanderer's words couldn't penetrate this barrier. Therefore, to see his true face, an opening must be created. At this moment, he slowly gathered his power. After all, he possessed a very powerful weapon. Although he couldn't unleash his full power, a thrust alone would be enough. With a sudden burst of strength, he unleashed the immortal's guidance, but it didn't cause any damage. However, the netizens were in an uproar, because Shang Jihan actually did it and he didn't stop there, instead launching countless attacks even more fiercely. In no time, he had punched a small hole in the huge barrier. At the same time, he suddenly activated the Wanderer's Eye, because he had to see his true face before the barrier recovered. But then he froze on the spot, because he found himself in another dimension. At that moment, a white light shone behind him. When he turned around, he was shocked, because a pair of giant eyes were staring at him. He had only awakened the most worthless Frank talent. Yet he was being subjected to the merciless abuse of everyone because of it. After encountering the Shadow Queen at the Bronze League, the man had been lying at home for 3 days and 3 nights, unable to calm down. That woman was simply too terrifying. Facing her with his bronze-level physique, the man was utterly powerless. Even with his pre-return strength, he wasn't sure he could defeat her. However, that woman's strength might be of great help. He then opened the achievement shop, which, based on his accumulated achievement points, had now been upgraded to level 5. The new feature brought by the upgrade is the addition of constellation slots, allowing him to select more constellations. However, purchasing it now is premature, as Earth is currently in tutorial mode, so it's not needed yet. He chose to add the title Chao Wei and then checked his status window. Unbeknownst to him, his level had already reached 22, just 3 levels away from becoming a silver player. He chose to add a title for a reason: he would soon obtain the title Inheritor of the Martial God. This title was acquired when Shang Jihan's martial prowess reached 30, allowing him to learn the nameless divine skill. Defeating the martial god during a communication session would grant him this title, the same one he had used in his previous life. He needed to learn the nameless divine skill as soon as possible, as he would soon face that guy. The scene shifted, showing the man leading Shirya in searching for an empty room. Shirya seemed to find the space too small, which was understandable, as she had always lived in the Jianwang Palace. Even the man hadn't expected his wish to move. It seemed that place had indeed brought him. There was a lot of pain involved, and in order to get him out of that environment as soon as possible, the man immediately decided that they needed a larger house. After all, Shia was about to become a player, so they needed more space to place the connectors. Of course, the matchmaker immediately agreed. He had always been a loyal fan of Shang Jihan, and he was very grateful for the man's care for Shia. Although he had been a member of the Sword King's clan before, he had decisively left the clan when the Sword King left. However, he was still very worried about Shia. Now, seeing his strong appearance, he was relieved. At the same time, he bestowed some blessings upon Seiya, saying, "You will surely awaken a remarkable talent." Speaking of talent, after that match, everyone's attention shifted back to Seiya. Once he awakened that Frank talent, he would be subjected to endless abuse. Therefore, the man secretly resolved to temporarily prevent others from approaching him, especially the reporters. Meanwhile, Kim Hee-soo had already arranged for reporters to interview Seiya on the day he awakened his talent. Even the blonde-haired man thought he was very scheming. But why do you hate him so much? Because without the appearance of the War King, Seiya wouldn't have. It would be a huge joke if he were to stand alongside someone with such a worthless talent. But do you really have a way to defeat Shang Jihan in the competition? What a joke! I don't even consider that guy a threat. His father is the strongest Sword King with a 3th level talent, while he has only awakened the worst level talent. Now, there are only 14 hours left until Shirya awakens her talent. At this moment, Kim Hee-joo is pleading with Shirya to give him an interview when he receives his talent, but Ye has flatly refused. Although Kim Hee-joo says it's all for his own good, Shia, unwilling to linger, turned and left. At that moment, he finally revealed his true colors. Even though Shia was unwilling to be interviewed, he had already planned his response. Tonight was the moment Shia's talent awakened. How interesting it would be if she awakened and Flevel talent. Meanwhile, Shia fell into deep thought. She had endured so much. In fact, he already knew Kim Hee-joo's true nature. One day, he overheard a conversation between Kim Hee-ju and others. Kim Hee-ju had her reasons for approaching him. She simply wanted to take advantage of Shia's despair. If he obtained infleval talent, it would be incredibly interesting. After learning his true nature, Shia was only shocked for a moment before feeling uneasy. He was terrified that he would actually obtain infleval talent. During the talent obtaining ceremony, he kept pleading, saying he would accept any talent, as long as it wasn't fleval. He hoped to obtain a decent one. However, after a flash of red light, the scene before him made his eyes widen. Yes, he obtained an frank talent, a late bloomer. Now it's truly all over. Rewinding to 5 hours before Shia received her talent, the man was rushing towards the talent hall. To prevent anyone from disturbing Shia, he used all his connections to evacuate everyone from the school, including the reporters, and even arranged for high-ranking officials to be on guard. After all, the higher-ups were also very worried about Shia's talent-granting ceremony. Seems I owe you another favor. He was then assigned to wait outside the hall. Although he was also very worried about Shia, all he could do now was protect her. At the same time, he also hoped for the gift in front of him,